This is a brief tutorial about mixing valves. This is a mixing valve. And this one is from a 1913 Evinrude. It's mounted on the side of the cylinder like that. This knob on top adjusts the poppet height, and the poppet regulates the amount of air sucked into the cylinder the height of the poppet is adjustable, and the more travel the poppet has, the larger amount of air is sucked in. Now the air and gas come in together, of course, but the more air there is, the leaner the mixture would be. Now it's a pretty straightforward deal. I'll take this off, take it apart here, and show you what it looks like inside. The top. You can see by turning this knob here, it causes this other end of it, this threaded end, to go up or down. And it butts up against the top of the poppet valve right there. Now let me take the poppet out. In order to do that, I have to remove this cotter pin first. Oop. Cotter pin, spring, and the little keeper. Now when it's assembled together, this is on the bottom of the spring, and the cotter pin goes through the stem of the poppet valve, holding the spring in place. When I take things apart, I like to lay them out as they came apart, so even if I've done it a lot of times, I know exactly how it goes back together. Now here is the poppet valve itself. Close-up view. I hope it's in focus. And here's the little hole where the cotter pin goes through. This edge right here seats on that shiny little beveled part inside, and they should mate without any gaps, ridges, or other imperfections. And you can see this one's pretty good, and it should be because I honed it a little bit. Anyway, that's the poppet part of it. And once the height is adjusted with this thing here, it's not necessary to play with it anymore. Leave it alone. Do not touch. Now, the other component of the stuff being sucked into the cylinder, of course, is the gasoline. Now this is how the mixing valve is attached to the cylinder, and this is the knob that you do adjust quite a lot. For one thing, every time you stop using your motor, you shut this. Not real hard, because you don't want to damage the end of the needle, but just enough. Just close it tightly, and that prevents gasoline falling out of your tank anymore. I'll show you what the needle valve looks like. The gas needle valve here. Dum-de-dum-de-dum. Now this one isn't in the best of all possible shape. You can see it's kind of pitted on the end. I wonder if this will help. You can see it's pitted a little bit here. The stem of this is also bent a little too, but that doesn't affect its use. But this part up here should be smooth, and it isn't. It's rusted and pitted. And this pointy beveled part is what regulates the amount of fuel coming out of the tank in here and then sucked in with air into the engine. Now there's a little tiny hole on the bevel edge where the poppet seats inside. It's down in there. Let me see if I can put a light on it here. See that little dot of light inside? Right there? I hope you can see that. That's where the gas comes through. And it's a tiny hole, as you can see. And, or I hope you can see. And the size of the opening really is regulated by this needle. And so that little hole has to be really, really clean all the time. And if it isn't, you're going to have big problems. You may not get any gas, or it'll be starved for gas, and it's awful when that happens. And it happens because there's crud in the tank, either from the gasoline itself or from a dirty tank lining, or just, junk in there that's accumulated over the last 100 years or so and not cleaned out properly. So anyway, the gas sucked in here, the air sucked in through the bottom here, and they come up here, and they come out here and into the cylinder, where they explode, hopefully. And, some nomenclature. The gas valve is called, this is called the gas valve, or like that. And this other part, which I should put back together, I suppose, show you how that's done, just slides, I hope I'm getting this on film, slides right in. The big end of the spring goes on first. I'm holding the poppet valve down with my thumb, and then the keeper goes on like that, and then the cotter pin goes on. There. Works just fine. And there's a little gasket on the top of this, by the way. You can see it right here. That should be in good shape and not broken, cracked, or anything. And it goes on like this. I'll tighten it down. It has to be tight. It has to be very tight, in fact. Okay, now this whole unit is called a mixing valve, more commonly just a mixer, and it used to be called a generating valve. But I don't think anybody uses that term any longer. And what differentiates this from a carburetor is that there's no float. Do I have a carb handy? I don't see one handy. There's one on the other side of the room. But anyway, there's a separate bowl hanging off the side of a carburetor, and there's a float that goes up and down that regulates the amount of fuel. This doesn't have that. This is an earlier design than that. And it works pretty well. These little sticks here, little brass rods, the one on the bottom here is missing. It would be like that. And they're used as placemakers, so you can tell, see there's numbers on the top of this dial, you can tell what the number is set at easily. And on the bottom you can do the same. The numbers are on the other side of the knob on the bottom one, so you can see it when it's on your motor. You can see it quite clearly. Usually when you're using this thing, as I said before, it'll be shut off. When you store it, when you're not using it, it'll be shut off. And so when you start it with whatever directions I gave you before for the setting. There's some variation from one of these things to another, but typically you open it, there's a little notch right here. I don't know if you can see it right there, that little shiny mark. Usually you turn this knob 1/2 turn to start and run. Now so occasionally you'll have, if it's cold out, you'll need to open it a little more so there's more fuel, and then when the motor gets warm you'll dial it back a little, but just move this a very little bit each time until you find the ideal running smoothness of your motor. It shouldn't cough or sputter, or it should run very smoothly. And I think that's pretty much it. Usually when you're starting, if you're encountering difficulties in starting your motor, it's because the mix is too rich. And if you lean it out a little bit, that is, if you close it slightly, and I do mean slightly, it'll start better. If you flood it, there's a number of ways to remedy that. The simplest being just turn this till it's closed, and turn over the engine, crank it over several times, and it may explode then. It may, go kapoof once or twice, and if it does, that means it's cleared out the excess fuel in the cylinder. Then you open up this to your standard position for running. And I think that's it. I can't think of anything else. The one unfortunate thing about these 13 Evinrudes is that, if there's crap inside here, it's best to clean it by taking it apart but leaving the mixer body fastened to the cylinder. Customarily, usually one would just take this off the motor, but to take it off a 13 Evinrude is difficult. Yeah, it's not really difficult. It's time consuming and a bit of a pain, because you have to take this is screwed into the gas tank itself, and so you have to take the tank off in order to unfasten this from the tank. And in order to take the tank off, you have to play with the exhaust manifold and loosen that up, because it covers one of the screws that holds the tank in place. So it's a pain. Most other motors don't have that problem. Kales don't, for instance. At least I don't think they do. Hold on for just a second. Let me check. I'll take that back. The early kales do have the same problem, where you have to play with the exhaust, move it over so you can get at one of the tank screws. But anyway, this does need to be cleaned, but you don't have to worry about it unless it's giving you problems. It's not a maintenance issue. Just leave it alone if it's running fine. Don't take it apart, don't clean it, don't do any of that stuff. Now, I assume you're getting ready to go back to Virginia for the winter, and if you are, it's a good idea to make sure the water is drained out of your motor. And in order to do that, you'll want, I don't have a 13 Evinrude handy here. There's one on the other side of the shop, but I'd have to carry it out of there to explain what I want you to do. But the hose that goes from the water pump to the side of the cylinder should be disconnected at the cylinder, or if it's easier, at the water pump. And then the motor itself should be turned on its side, and what water is in the cylinder will drain out. That's important. You don't want that junk in there all winter when you're not using it. And sometimes it helps to turn it over a few times before you start that process. And it's easier to turn it over if you're on your motor by removing the spark plug first. And just crank it over several times and some water will come out. The rest of it has to be tipped out. Make sure the gas tank is absolutely free of gas for winter storage. And I guess that's about it. I can't think of anything else. Mixing valve, mixer, air adjusting knob, gas adjusting knob. And I realize I called this by other names, but from now on, I've learned my lesson. Knob. I guess that's it. I can't think of another thing. Oh, you might want to make sure that your spark plug is cleaned. Let me just dig one out of here. Here's a really clean one. These little electrodes right here should be gapped, and I told you how to do that, I believe. And it should be cleaned, and you'll want some, where is it? Some wet dry paper. Here it is. Some wet dry paper, and put it in the gap, and polish the end of that and the side of this prong here. They're electrodes, and they should be nice and clean. If there's a lot of soot and crap and junk in there, put your thing in this, or odorless mineral spirits, and just get a little cup, dunk this in there and let it soak overnight. Take it out the next morning, dry it off with a paper towel, and then clean it up with a wire brush. And then finally sand it with this, where the spark goes. And the spark goes where this gap is. What else is there? I think that's it. As I said before, make absolutely sure for winter storage, no water and no gas in the tank. Really important. And before you start off in the summer, make sure there's grease in the gear case. And I believe I showed you how to do that when I was up at your house. So you should be all set. And if it's running, and it seems to be from your letter, then you know how to set the gas knob or valve properly. Just don't play with this. Okay, that's all. Have a nice winter. I'll see you next year maybe. Who knows? Bye-bye.